Okay, in a previous video I mentioned histograms and how you can get to them by just left-clicking anywhere on the photo in Polarr. Some of you may be saying, this is a mysterious thing, I see it occasionally popping up on, well, even quite cheap cameras nowadays. But what is a histogram? And more importantly, how can it help us improve our photos? Well, it's really very simple. A histogram is just a graph. Probably much like you learned about in school, I would imagine, as I did. And it's a very simple graph. It's got two axes, a y-axis, which is the vertical one, and the horizontal one, the x-axis. On the x-axis, we've actually got the brightness value of pixels, and that goes from 0, which is absolute black, to 255, which is peak white. Then on the y-axis we've got the actual number of pixels that fall into those particular levels. Now you may be thinking, well, 256 values for a pixel brightness doesn't seem very much, but we've actually got that range for the red channel, the blue channel, and the green channel, and by mixing up together various brightnesses of those three channels we can make colours. So what this means is that we've got 256 times 256 times 256, which gives us 16.7 million, roughly, variants of colour combinations that we can actually have. So that should probably cover most people. There are other colour spaces that professionals use that have a wider colour gamut and so on and so forth, but for most people you don't need to worry about them. So we'll stick with our 16.7 million colour variations. Okay, let's have a look at a couple of examples of this. So here we've got a photograph, and as you can see there's a lot of bright information on there, not so much dark information, mostly it's all up in the bright. So obviously the pyramid here, and also the floor and the sky. Now if we just left click anywhere in the photo, we get our histogram up. As we can see, there's exactly what we can see in the picture. There's a predominance of very light areas and not so much in the dark areas here. Let's leave the histogram on there and let's see what happens if I actually shift up the exposure. Obviously it becomes brighter, but we can see now, when I let go, that most of the image information has been pushed up into the brighter areas. And likewise, if I take it down, we can see that things shift down below here. Why a histogram can be useful is because very often we're looking at a photograph and it's not on a perfect monitor, the monitor isn't necessarily calibrated, all kinds of reasons like that. So when we're pushing up exposure and changing brightness and contrast and things like that, we don't want to feel that we're losing any image data by clipping it off either at the top end or at the bottom end. So a very quick way to look at that is the histogram. So going back to our overexposed example, I'll push the exposure right back up, I can see by the look of the histogram it's pretty clear that there's other data up there, but it's being cropped off. So bringing it back again, and we can see it returns. There's one more thing about histograms. You may notice that there's a kind of, if we look over here, there's a kind of red tinge and a little bit of a green tinge up here. The white part of the histogram is the overall picture, but very often you can find that it's not necessarily the best idea just to look at that if you're fine-tuning something, because let me give you another example. If I take this image here, I can see by looking at the histogram that there is a lot of blue information in the top end, in the brighter values. And this is of course the blue of the sky. So if I was to push up the exposure, I'm actually going to lose a lot of that blue information, even though the white information wasn't as high as the blue. So it's a good idea to look at all of them. So what have we discovered? That the histogram is a useful tool, and we pop it up just by left clicking and left clicking again to make it disappear. And it shows us broadly in a mathematical way how our picture is actually made up.